They gave the ugliest alien woman to a human man, but he didn't hesitate because he already knew. Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, Elias had seen many strange worlds, countless alien species, and unimaginable landscapes, but this mission felt different. It was not about exploration or conquest. It was about understanding, about empathy, about proving that humans, small as their home planet was, could rise above fear and judgment to embrace the unknown. The starship Aurora hovered above the silver-blue planet of Zyphera, its polished hull glinting in the light of a distant sun. The Galactic Council had chosen this neutral world for a controversial experiment, pairing representatives from different species to study cooperation and adaptation. Delegates from dozens of civilizations were already present, and the Council had something unusual for Elias. They called it a gift. He had been briefed, of course, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight of Thryla. When she entered the chamber, the other delegates gasped. Whispers filled the air like the rustling of leaves in a storm. Thryla's appearance was nothing like any human had ever seen. Her skin shimmered in shades of deep violet and green, like liquid opal. Several eyes, 6 in total, lined her face, each moving independently yet focusing on Elias with an intensity he could feel. Her mouth, far wider than a human's, could stretch into expressions that conveyed her thoughts in ways words never could. Jagged scales adorned her shoulders and neck, reflecting light like armor. Her hands ended in long, delicate fingers tipped with translucent claws that glimmered in the chamber lights. To anyone else, she looked monstrous. But to Elias, there was something else entirely, something human, something real. While the council representatives whispered behind their palms and tilted their heads in horror, Elias studied her calmly. He did not flinch. He did not hesitate. He had a strange, unexplainable certainty that Thryla was more than what her appearance suggested. Something deep within him recognized strength, intelligence, and wisdom behind her alien features. Thryla, for her part, held herself with quiet dignity. She was aware of the stares, the judgments, the ridicule. She had been called ugly countless times by her own species, dismissed for her appearance despite her brilliance. She had learned to hide her emotions, to mask her intelligence behind a carefully neutral exterior. But Elias saw past it. He saw her as she truly was. And that recognition unsettled her in ways she had never expected. The council leader, a towering being with translucent skin that pulsed with color, stepped forward. "Captain Mercer, meet your assigned companion for this experiment," the leader announced, its voice a chorus of harmonies that seemed to vibrate in the air itself. "Thryla of the Varkari species, you are to live and work together on the Aurora as part of this study." Some of the human delegates in the chamber snickered softly, unable to hide their discomfort. Others simply stared in disbelief, but Elias only nodded once respectfully. "I understand," he said, his voice steady. Thryla inclined her head slightly, acknowledging him. There was no warmth in the gesture, no attempt at friendliness, but also no hostility. It was a neutral gesture, yet it carried weight. Elias felt a subtle pulse of curiosity from her, almost like a ripple across water. As the Aurora prepared for departure, the ship's artificial intelligence began its automated announcements. Elias and Thryla were assigned adjoining quarters, and both were expected to participate in all training exercises, simulations, and missions during the voyage to Earth. Walking through the ship's corridors together, Elias observed Thryla closely. She moved with fluid grace, each motion deliberate, careful, as if every step had meaning. Despite her alien form, there was elegance in the way she carried herself. She did not stumble, she did not fumble, and she did not falter. "You are quiet," Elias said, breaking the silence. His voice was gentle, almost inviting. "Most humans would be afraid of someone like me." He gestured toward himself, and then, with a slight nod, toward her. "Do you feel the same about me?" Thryla's many eyes shifted, studying him. A faint ripple of what might have been a smile touched her mouth, but it vanished almost immediately. "Fear is unhelpful," she said finally, her voice low, smooth, and musical. "I prefer to observe." Elias nodded. "Observation is a good start. Understanding comes next, and understanding requires patience." There was something in his tone that intrigued her. Most beings, when confronted with her appearance, reacted with disgust or mockery. Elias did neither. He did not look away. He did not flinch. He acknowledged her as a person, as a partner, as someone worth knowing. Their journey through the ship continued in silence for a while. The corridors of the Aurora were vast and filled with the soft hum of engines and life support systems. Aliens of various shapes and sizes passed by, casting curious glances at the human and the Varkari walking side by side. Some whispered, some laughed quietly, and some simply stared. Yet Elias remained unfazed. Thryla, meanwhile, maintained her composure, though she could feel the weight of judgment pressing down upon her. As the ship left Zyphera's orbit, passing into the endless void of space, the Aurora faced its first minor challenge. A cluster of meteorites drifted across their path, detected by the ship's sensors. The captain gave the command to adjust the course manually, but the usual control interfaces failed. The ship's AI, though highly intelligent, could not account for the rapid, unpredictable shifts of the debris. Without hesitation, Thryla stepped forward. She placed her multiple hands on the console, her translucent claws brushing over the controls. Her eyes darted across the readings at incredible speed, analyzing patterns invisible to human sensors. Within moments, she identified the safest path through the meteor field. Elias followed her instructions exactly, trusting her instincts without question. The ship maneuvered flawlessly, avoiding collisions, and the crisis passed. The crew, who had watched from the observation deck, erupted in whispers and murmurs. Some were impressed, others were shocked, but none could deny that Thryla's unique abilities had saved them all. Elias glanced at her. "You have remarkable skills," he said simply. "Most humans wouldn't even know how to begin to read the sensors like that." Thryla looked at him, and for the first time something like a flicker of respect appeared in her expression. "I have survived longer than many of my kind," she replied. "Experience teaches lessons that appearance does not." Elias nodded again. He understood that all beings, regardless of shape or form, carried histories, struggles, and strengths invisible to the eye. "Exactly," he said, "and I think the Council has forgotten that lesson." Days passed aboard the Aurora, and the initial awkwardness between Elias and Thryla began to shift into a tentative understanding. They shared quiet meals in the mess hall, walked along observation decks that overlooked swirling galaxies, and exchanged stories about their worlds. Thryla spoke carefully, revealing hints of her past life on the harsh planet of Varkar Prime, where survival required intelligence, adaptability, and unwavering focus. Elias shared tales of Earth's struggles and triumphs, of humanity's small victories in a vast and often hostile universe. Despite the differences in their languages, cultures, and bodies, they began to communicate in ways deeper than words. A glance, a gesture, a shift in posture became conversation. Elias found himself fascinated by the alien rhythms of her thought, while Thryla was intrigued by the human capacity for empathy and persistence. One evening, as the ship drifted past a violet nebula, Elias looked at Thryla and asked, "Do you ever feel judged for who you are?" Thryla's many eyes focused on him, reflecting the nebula's light. "Always," she said simply. "By my own people, by others in the galaxy. Judged by appearances, by assumptions, by fear, I have learned to survive despite it." Elias nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I have always believed that appearances are the easiest part of a being to misjudge. The real measure is action, thought, and heart." Thryla tilted her head slightly, considering his words. "You see me as I am," she said quietly. "That is unusual." "Not unusual," Elias corrected gently. "Necessary." That night, in their adjoining quarters, neither slept immediately. Both lay awake, thinking. Elias reflected on the peculiar certainty that had drawn him to trust Thryla from the first moment. Thryla contemplated the human beside her, a creature capable of respect and understanding in a universe too often blinded by prejudice. For the first time in many cycles, she felt something she had not known before, cautious hope. The galaxy outside was vast, mysterious, and often cruel. But within the confines of the Aurora, aboard a ship bridging worlds and species, something remarkable had begun. Two beings, judged by many as incompatible, had found recognition and trust in each other. And in that quiet understanding lay the first spark of what could become a bond capable of defying the galaxy's expectations. Elias Mercer did not hesitate because he already knew. He knew that appearances were never the true measure of worth. He knew that strength often came wrapped in forms that startled the eye. And he knew with unwavering certainty that Thryla, the so-called ugliest alien woman in the galaxy, was a being worthy of respect, trust, and perhaps something even more profound. And so the journey began, not just across the stars, but toward understanding, empathy, and the possibility of a partnership that could challenge the prejudices of the entire galaxy. The Aurora glided silently through the black sea of stars. Each pulse of the ship's engine seemed to echo the quiet thoughts of its passengers. Captain Elias Mercer walked the observation deck, his gaze tracing the light of distant suns, but his mind was not on the stars. It was on Thyla. The alien woman moved beside him, her multiple eyes reflecting the distant lights like shimmering jewels. She was quiet as she always was, but there was a new awareness in her posture, a recognition that this human did not fear her, did not pity her, and most importantly, did not judge her for how she looked. For the first time in cycles, she felt seen. Elias broke the silence. "Do you ever feel out of place, Thyla?" She considered him for a moment, her gaze sweeping over the galaxy beyond the ship. "Out of place?" she asked in her soft, melodic voice. "Everywhere I go, I am out of place. Even among my own people, I was never accepted. My body, my features, my abilities, different. Different is feared, different is avoided. I have learned to survive, but not to belong." Elias nodded, understanding more than she could know. "Humans know that feeling well," he said. "We are often judged for things we cannot change, but belonging comes from connection, not appearances. That is something I think you already know." Thyla's expression softened slightly. She had spent much of her life avoiding trust, avoiding closeness. But this human seemed different. He did not rush, did not push. He simply observed, listened, and respected. For someone like her, that was a rare and precious gift. Their first days on the Aurora were filled with training exercises. Delegates from other civilizations had been assigned partners, too, but none received the reactions that Elias and Thyla did. Whispers followed them through the corridors. Some called it absurd. Others quietly questioned how a human could possibly bond with someone so unconventional. Thyla, aware of the stares, had learned to maintain a mask of neutrality. She did not respond with anger or pride. She simply observed, noting who was competent, who was weak, and who carried courage beyond appearances. Elias noticed, but he never made her feel scrutinized. Instead, he offered patience, guidance, and a quiet confidence that slowly began to draw her out. One day, as the ship passed near a field of unstable asteroids, the AI announced a minor course adjustment. A human engineer tried to take control, but the calculations were complex, and the ship's systems were unpredictable in the shifting gravitational field. "Let me try," Thyla said, stepping forward. Her voice was calm, almost casual, but Elias knew better. He had seen her work once before during a minor malfunction. The way she read data, the way her multiple eyes processed patterns invisible to humans, he had never witnessed anything like it. He stepped back, allowing her to move to the console. Her fingers, long and delicate, danced over the controls, adjusting settings with precision. Her eyes flicked across readouts in ways no human could, scanning probabilities, predicting outcomes, and anticipating changes. Within moments, the Aurora passed safely through the asteroid field. The crew who had been watching gasped in amazement. Some muttered that she was a miracle, others called it unnatural, but Elias simply nodded at her, quietly acknowledging her skill. "You are remarkable," he said once the danger passed. "You don't just survive, you excel." Thyla's head tilted, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. "Experience teaches what appearances cannot," she said. "I have survived longer than many of my kind. I have learned to trust in my senses, my instincts, and sometimes in others." Elias' lips curved into a small smile. "Sometimes trusting in others is the hardest lesson." The days stretched into weeks. Thyla and Elias began sharing more of their pasts. She spoke of Varkar Prime, a harsh, desolate world where survival demanded cunning, intelligence, and adaptability. She told him of the times she had been rejected, judged, and underestimated. Elias shared stories of Earth, of humanity's struggles with prejudice, war, and misunderstanding. They found that despite the differences in species, their experiences often mirrored each other. One evening, as the Aurora drifted past a sparkling nebula, Elias and Thyla sat together in the observation deck, watching the stars stretch into lines as the ship accelerated. "You know," Elias said quietly, "I have always believed that strength is not measured by appearances or size or speed. It is measured by courage, by empathy, and by persistence. And by that measure, you are one of the strongest beings I have ever met." Thryla's many eyes met his, and for a moment she allowed herself a small, genuine smile. "You are unusual," she said softly. "Most beings would recoil or sneer. You do neither." Elias shrugged lightly. "I have learned that appearances are the easiest thing to misjudge. True worth lies beneath the surface, and I have always trusted my instincts. My instincts tell me that you are capable of far more than anyone gives you credit for." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of understanding, recognition, and something neither had expected: trust. As the journey continued, their partnership grew. They were assigned exercises that tested not only their physical abilities, but their problem-solving skills and capacity to work together under pressure. Delegates from other worlds watched in disbelief as Elias relied on Thryla's instincts, adapting human strategies to her alien perspective. The pair seemed to anticipate each other's thoughts and movements, creating solutions that neither could have achieved alone. During one exercise simulating a crash landing on a hostile planet, the Aurora's systems were intentionally disabled to test the crew's response. Alarms blared, lights flashed, and smoke filled the corridors. Human and alien crew members scrambled to respond, but Elias and Thryla worked with a calm focus that stunned observers. Thryla navigated the corridors with ease, guiding humans who struggled with panic. Elias coordinated responses, relying on her guidance for hazards that humans could not detect. Together, they stabilized the simulated disaster, saving the crew and demonstrating remarkable teamwork. Afterward, the council representatives whispered among themselves. Some admitted that they had underestimated the human and the Varkari. Others remained skeptical, but no one could deny the results. Elias had not hesitated to trust Thryla, and that trust had saved them all, even in a controlled simulation. One quiet night, Elias and Thryla sat in the ship's observation lounge, looking out at a galaxy that stretched endlessly in all directions. "Do you ever wish things were different?" Elias asked. "That your people had accepted you?" Thryla's gaze turned inward as if seeing memories across countless light years. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I have learned that wishing does not change reality. It only teaches patience, adaptability, and the value of alliances, and now I am learning to trust in new ways." "With you," Elias nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "I have always believed that connections are more important than conformity. The galaxy will judge based on appearances, but we can choose differently. We can prove that empathy, courage, and respect matter more than looks or fear." Thryla studied him closely. There was a depth in his words, a sincerity that resonated with her. "You are rare," she said simply. "Most humans would not see past what is obvious. You do. And most aliens would not trust a human immediately," he replied. "But I do, because I know that true strength is not what you see, but what you feel and how you act." As the days passed, the Aurora faced minor challenges. Navigating asteroid fields, maintaining life support during cosmic storms, and conducting complex experiments for the Council. Each time, Elias and Thryla proved that their partnership was more than functional. It was extraordinary. Crew members began to take notice. Some approached Elias with questions, seeking guidance on how to work with Thryla. Others observed her closely, trying to understand how she could accomplish tasks that seemed impossible to humans. Thryla, for her part, maintained her composure, never boasting, but always demonstrating skill and intelligence. Slowly, respect replaced ridicule. Where whispers had once filled the corridors, curiosity and admiration began to grow. And yet, neither Elias nor Thryla sought recognition. Their bond was not about proving others wrong. It was about understanding, trust, and mutual respect. One evening, as the Aurora passed through a brilliant field of cosmic clouds, Elias turned to Thryla. "Do you ever think about what comes next? After the journey?" Thryla considered the question. "I do not know," she said. "The future is uncertain, and I have learned not to rely on certainty. But I do know this: I am not alone, and I have found someone who sees beyond the surface. That is rare." Elias smiled. "It is rare, yes, but sometimes rare things are the most valuable. And I believe we are just beginning to discover what we can accomplish together." In that moment, the stars outside seemed to shine a little brighter. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and full of danger, but aboard the Aurora, Elias and Thryla had begun to form a partnership that could face anything. Not because they were perfect, but because they trusted one another completely. For Thryla, it was a revelation. For Elias, it was confirmation of a belief he had always held, that true worth was measured not by appearances, but by courage, intelligence, and heart. And as the ship sailed onward toward Earth, both knew that their journey was only beginning, and that the bond they had formed could change everything. The galaxy, full of judgment and fear, would have to wait. The Aurora approached a newly terraformed planet on the edge of the Council's territory. Its surface glowed with shades of green and amber, rivers snaking through forests that seemed to breathe under the twin suns. The Council had prepared a final test for all paired delegates, a survival simulation designed to challenge skill, intelligence, and cooperation. Elias Mercer stood on the observation deck, watching the planet below. Beside him, Thryla's multiple eyes reflected the amber sunlight, each one moving independently yet coordinating perfectly with the others. She had grown accustomed to the human's calm presence, though her instincts told her to remain cautious. In truth, she had spent much of her life being judged and dismissed. Now she was about to prove her worth, not to the galaxy, but to herself. The Council's leader addressed all participants through the ship's communication system. Your final test begins upon landing. You will face harsh terrain, unpredictable weather, and challenges designed to test your abilities. Success requires cooperation, strategy, and trust. Fail, and your performance will be recorded for analysis. Most delegates exchanged confident smiles, believing that the exercise would be simple. Many of their partners were from species considered superior in strength or intellect. But Elias and Thryla exchanged a quiet glance, understanding that appearances meant little here. What mattered was trust, and they had that in abundance. The Aurora descended through the planet's thick atmosphere, shaking with turbulence as it passed through dense clouds. Crew members clutched railings, but Elias remained steady, his eyes fixed on Thryla, silently communicating that they could face whatever came. When the shuttle touched down on the rugged surface, Elias and Thryla stepped out together. The ground was uneven, covered in jagged rocks and thick moss that glimmered faintly under the sunlight. A cold wind whipped across the plains, carrying strange scents and the distant cries of creatures unseen. The simulation began immediately. Holographic projections created hazards that challenged all 5 senses: collapsing rocks, sudden floods, and aggressive wildlife designed to test reactions. Other pairs struggled instantly. Some delegates panicked, relying solely on brute strength or reflexes, while their partners tried in vain to maintain control. Elias turned to Thryla. "We need a plan," he said calmly. "Observe first, then act." Thryla's eyes shifted rapidly across the terrain. "There is a pattern," she noted. "The projections respond to movement and weight. We can predict the collapse points and avoid danger if we move carefully." Together, they advanced. Thryla guided Elias around unstable ground, her multiple limbs allowing her to scale difficult areas easily, while Elias adjusted their route to account for hidden hazards. Where humans would have stumbled, they moved smoothly, a synchronized dance of intelligence and instinct. At one point, a sudden holographic flood burst from the rocks nearby, sending simulated water roaring toward them. Other teams panicked, but Elias stayed calm. "Follow my lead," he said. Thryla adjusted her body to shield both of them as he guided them to higher ground. The water passed without harm. The Council observers were silent. They had expected this pair to falter quickly. The whispers of ridicule and judgment that had followed them on the Aurora grew quiet as the human, and the Varkari continued to move through the simulation with extraordinary efficiency. Hours passed. The terrain grew more treacherous, with shifting sands, sudden cliffs, and dense forests that hid aggressive wildlife projections. Elias and Thryla communicated without words, relying on subtle gestures, eye movements, and intuition. Their partnership was not just effective, it was seamless. At one point, they encountered a holographic predator, a massive creature with glowing eyes and razor-sharp appendages. Most delegates would have frozen in fear, but Thryla analyzed the predator instantly. "It responds to sound and movement. We can distract it while we pass," she whispered. Elias nodded. "Do it." Using a combination of sound and subtle motion, Thryla drew the predator's attention while Elias guided them along a hidden path. The predator followed her carefully calculated movements, and they reached safety. The other teams struggled to escape, some barely managing to survive. As the day wore on, fatigue set in. The simulation pushed both physical and mental limits. Elias and Thrila rested briefly on a cliff overlooking a valley bathed in orange light from the twin suns. "You work well under pressure," Elias observed. "I have never seen anyone, human or alien, adapt so quickly." Thryla's eyes softened. "Experience teaches survival, but it is trust that allows cooperation. Without your calm presence, this task would be far more difficult." Elias smiled faintly. "We are a team, Thryla. That is all that matters." The final challenge approached, a vast canyon with unstable bridges and shifting platforms that required precise timing and trust to cross. Other teams had already begun to falter, some giving up entirely. Elias studied the canyon carefully. "We move together," he said. "One step at a time, trust each other completely." Thryla inclined her head. "Agreed." They advanced. Thryla's multiple limbs allowed her to stabilize the shifting platforms, while Elias calculated distances and timing. When a section collapsed unexpectedly, Thryla grabbed Elias instantly, adjusting her stance to support both of them. The precision, timing, and trust between them were flawless. They crossed the canyon, reaching the other side unscathed. The council observers were stunned. Delegates who had mocked them were now silent, their eyes wide with disbelief. A few began to murmur quietly, acknowledging that the human and the Varkari had achieved what no one else could. As the simulation concluded, Elias and Thryla reached the final point, a small platform overlooking the alien planet. They stood side by side, catching their breath, eyes scanning the horizon. For a moment, no words were spoken. They did not need them. The bond forged through hours of survival, trust, and cooperation spoke louder than any language could. "You were right," Thryla said finally. "Appearance does not determine capability. Trust determines it." Elias nodded. "I have always believed that. And now the galaxy will see it too." The council leader's voice came over the communicator. "Captain Mercer, Thryla of the Varkari, your performance exceeds expectations. You have demonstrated skill, intelligence, and teamwork beyond any previous pair. Your success will be recorded as a model for future delegations." Thryla allowed herself a small, genuine smile. "It is unusual to be recognized for who I truly am," she admitted. "You earned it," Elias replied simply. "You never doubted yourself, you never hesitated. And you trusted me. That is why we succeeded." The other delegates gathered, some approaching cautiously. Eyes that had once judged with disdain now looked with curiosity, respect, and in a few cases, admiration. Whispers of ridicule faded, replaced by acknowledgement of skill and courage. Elias and Thryla returned to the Aurora together, the bond between them stronger than ever. In private, Elias reflected on the journey so far. He had never hesitated in trusting Thryla because he had sensed her strength from the very beginning. Her appearance had never mattered to him. He had always known that value lies not in looks, but in character, intelligence, and courage. Thryla, meanwhile, felt a sense of pride she had never experienced. For cycles, she had been judged as less than others, dismissed because of her form. But now she had proven to the galaxy and to herself that her worth was undeniable. And she had done it alongside a human who had seen her as she truly was. The Aurora set course for Earth once again, the final leg of their journey. The council observers would report their findings, but Elias and Thryla did not care about accolades. They cared about the partnership they had formed, the trust they had built, and the knowledge that they could face any challenge together. At night, when the ship was quiet and the stars stretched endlessly outside, Elias and Thryla often walked along the observation decks. Words were not always necessary. A glance, a gesture, a shared understanding, it was enough. The galaxy outside was vast, full of prejudice, fear, and misunderstanding. But aboard the Aurora, two beings had proven that empathy, trust, and courage could overcome any obstacle. "You know," Elias said one evening, gazing at the nebula glowing in soft purples and pinks, "I never doubted you, not for a moment." Thryla's eyes, reflecting the nebula's colors, met his. "I felt it," she said softly. "Even before we faced the simulation, I sensed your trust." That made all the difference. Elias smiled faintly. "Sometimes all it takes is someone who believes in you, even when the rest of the galaxy does not." Thryla allowed herself another small smile. "Then I am glad you were the one to walk beside me. Perhaps together we can teach the galaxy something important." "Yes," Elias said, his voice steady and warm. "We can, one step at a time." And so the Aurora sailed onward through the stars, carrying two beings who had defied expectations, challenged prejudice, and formed a partnership that no one could doubt. The survival simulation had tested them, but it had also revealed something far more important: the true strength of trust, cooperation, and understanding across the boundaries of species. The galaxy might judge on appearances. It might scoff at differences. But Ilias and Thrila had already discovered a truth that few understood. Worth is measured by courage, empathy, and heart. And they were only just beginning their journey. The Aurora cruised smoothly through the void, leaving behind the terraformed test planet. Stars streaked past in long lines as the ship accelerated, carrying Captain Ilias Mercer and Thrila toward Earth. They had survived the Council's survival simulation, exceeding all expectations, yet the weight of what lay ahead pressed quietly upon them. The Council had scheduled a private review of their performance. It was not merely a formality. It was a moment that would define how the galaxy would view the partnership of a human and a Varkari. Ilias knew that appearances had already drawn disbelief and ridicule, but now the results would be public, and every delegate would see their competence. Thrila, usually composed, was silent in the hours before the meeting. She moved through the ship's corridors with her usual grace, yet there was a tension in her posture Ilias could sense. He had learned to read the subtle signals of her body, to recognize the quiet moments that spoke louder than words. "You are quiet," he said as they walked along the observation deck, gazing at a distant nebula glowing in soft blues and purples. "I am considering," Thrila replied, her voice low and steady, "the judgments that will be made." Success is not enough to silence those who only see the surface. Ilias nodded. The galaxy will always judge by appearances first. That is why what we have done is more important. We have proven skill, intelligence, and cooperation. Those who understand will see it. The rest will learn in time. Thrila tilted her head, a gesture Ilias had come to interpret as thoughtfulness. "It is difficult to trust that the rest of the galaxy can understand," she admitted. "Most beings assume the obvious, the immediate, and the superficial. Few consider depth, experience, or intent. And those who do?" Ilias asked gently. Thryla's eyes met his, a rare vulnerability flickering across her multiple faces. "They are rare," she said softly. "But you are not one of them. From the first moment I sensed recognition. Not judgment, but understanding." Ilias smiled faintly. "I never hesitated because I already knew. I recognized your strength, intelligence, and adaptability. Your appearance was never a factor. It does not define you." For a moment, silence enveloped them, the stars beyond the glass stretching endlessly. In that quiet, both reflected on the journey so far. The challenges of the Aurora, the survival simulation, and the slow transformation of perception among the Council and their peers. When they arrived at the Council's assembly chamber, the room was filled with delegates from dozens of species. Many still wore expressions of skepticism, and a few openly stared at Thrila. Ilias noticed, but he did not falter. He had learned long ago that confidence and calm could be more powerful than anger or frustration. The Council leader spoke, addressing the assembly. "Captain Mercer, Thrila of the Varkari, your performance in the survival simulation has exceeded expectations. Your ability to cooperate, adapt, and achieve results is unparalleled. We have observed your partnership, and it is remarkable." Whispers filled the room. Delegates who had mocked them in private now shifted uneasily in their seats. Some were impressed, others were forced to reconsider long-held prejudices. The leader continued, "Thrila, we have reviewed reports from your home world. You have been considered, different among your people, dismissed for your appearance. Yet your abilities, intelligence, and survival skills are exceptional. Captain Mercer, it is clear that you have recognized the same." Ilias nodded. "I did not need to study her to know her worth. It was evident from the beginning. Strength, intelligence, and courage cannot be measured by appearances alone." Thryla's many eyes focused on him, and for the first time in cycles, she allowed herself a quiet acknowledgement of gratitude. The room may have been full of observers, but the moment belonged to them. One delegate, a tall being with crystalline wings, spoke cautiously. "It is unusual for a human to trust so completely in an alien whose appearance is unconventional." Ilias' voice was calm, firm, and unwavering. "Unconventional is not inferior. Judgments based on appearances are easy, but they do not reflect true capability. Thrila has proven skill, intelligence, and trustworthiness in every challenge. That is what matters." Another delegate, a short reptilian creature with scales that shimmered in shades of red, muttered, "Yet many will see her as ugly. How can the galaxy accept such a pairing?" Thryla's voice, though quiet, carried authority. "The galaxy's perception does not define my abilities or my worth. Judgments based on fear or superficiality are irrelevant. Only action, knowledge, and cooperation matter." The chamber fell silent. For the first time, many of the delegates considered that they had been wrong to judge so quickly. The results of the survival simulation, combined with Elia's and Thryla's calm confidence, left little room for doubt. In a private moment after the assembly concluded, Thryla confided in Elia's. "You saw me as I am from the first moment. How could you know?" Elia's eyes were steady. "I did not need to know. I sensed it. You carry strength and intelligence in ways that cannot be hidden. I recognized it immediately. That is why I never hesitated to trust you." For a moment, Thryla's posture softened. She had spent much of her life hiding behind composure, masking her thoughts and concealing her abilities. But Elia's confidence had allowed her to reveal them freely without fear of ridicule or rejection. "Most humans," she said, "would have recoiled or judged me. Most would have hesitated, feared, or mocked, but you did neither." "I have learned," Elias replied, "that worth is not measured by appearances. It is measured by courage, intelligence, empathy, and the willingness to act when it matters. You possess all of these qualities. That was clear from the beginning." As the ship traveled through the quiet expanse of space, Thryla reflected on her past. She had been dismissed as unworthy by her own species. Her appearance had been a barrier, even though her abilities were unmatched. For cycles, she had hidden her true self, fearing judgment and rejection. Yet now, she had found someone who saw her without prejudice, someone who valued her for her mind, her courage, and her spirit. The realization was profound. For the first time, she felt a sense of belonging, not among the stars or in the council, but with Elias. She had been cautious, wary of humans and other species alike, but this human had proven that empathy, understanding, and trust could bridge even the deepest divides. Their partnership had become more than a test. It was a quiet rebellion against the galaxy's superficial judgments, a demonstration that appearances were irrelevant when compared to ability, courage, and character. One evening, as the Aurora passed near a glowing cluster of nebulae, Elias spoke quietly. "Do you understand why I never hesitated?" Thryla's gaze met his. "I do," she said softly. "I sensed your trust even before I fully trusted you. That gave me strength. It allowed me to act without hesitation to show what I am capable of, and now the galaxy sees it too." "Yes," Elias said, "but it is not for them that we do this. It is for ourselves and for anyone who has ever been judged by appearances alone. We prove that strength, intelligence, and courage cannot be measured by what is seen on the surface." Thryla allowed herself a small, genuine smile, a rare expression that had been almost impossible for her to show in public. "Then I am glad," she said, "that you were the one to see me as I truly am." The Aurora continued its journey to Earth, carrying with it two beings who had challenged assumptions, defied prejudice, and demonstrated that trust and cooperation could overcome any obstacle. The survival simulation had tested them, but the real revelation was deeper. The galaxy had witnessed the power of recognition, empathy, and understanding. For Thryla, the experience was transformative. She had spent her life hiding behind her appearance, suppressing her abilities, and fearing judgment. Now, she had not only survived, but had been acknowledged for her true self. For Elias, it was a confirmation of belief that humanity could rise above fear and superficiality, embracing potential in all forms. The galaxy might still be quick to judge, but aboard the Aurora, a new truth had emerged. The measure of a being was not the shape of their body or the number of limbs they had. It was the strength of their mind, the courage of their heart, and the capacity to trust and be trusted. And in the quiet of space, as stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass of the observation deck, Elias and Thryla began to understand something even more profound. They were no longer just a human and an alien working together. They were a partnership that could redefine expectations, challenge prejudice, and inspire others to see beyond the surface. For the first time in cycles, Thryla allowed herself to hope, not just for survival, but for recognition, understanding, and the possibility of something lasting. Elias, meanwhile, knew with unwavering certainty that he had found a partner whose strength and intelligence could match any challenge the galaxy might present. The journey continued, and with every passing light year, the bond between them grew stronger, deeper, and more unbreakable. The galaxy might judge by appearances, but Elias and Thrila had discovered a truth that could not be denied. Real value is measured by courage, empathy, and heart. And as the Aurora sailed toward Earth, the revelation was clear. Appearances were only skin deep. True strength, intelligence, and worth shone from within, and those who could recognize it would see a future brighter than any star. The Aurora cut through the darkness of space, stars stretching into long lines as the ship approached Earth. Captain Elias Mercer and Thrila of the Varkari stood side by side on the observation deck, their reflections mirrored in the polished glass. The journey had tested them in ways neither could have imagined. The survival simulation had been just the beginning. The galaxy's judgment had hovered over them like a shadow, yet together, they had proven not only their abilities but also the power of trust, courage, and understanding. Elias glanced at Thrila. Her scales shimmered under the artificial lights of the deck, each of her 6 eyes reflecting intelligence, focus, and something softer, a glimmer of pride. She had grown in confidence since they first met. She no longer moved cautiously, fearful of judgment. Now she moved with purpose, carrying herself as someone fully capable, fully seen, and fully respected. "You have changed," Elias said softly. Thrila tilted her head slightly. "And you as well," she replied. "I have learned that not all humans judge by appearances. I had not expected to find one who sees beyond the surface. You have taught me that trust can be more powerful than fear." Elias smiled faintly. "It was never a lesson I intended to teach. It was something I believed, and it seems we have both learned from each other." Their journey to Earth was quiet for several days, allowing time for reflection. Thrila spent hours in the observation lounge, scanning the stars, calculating distances, and observing patterns. Yet she also began to explore another skill, curiosity without judgment. Elias encouraged it, asking questions about her home planet, her species, and even about experiences she had never shared before. Slowly, the Varkari woman began to open up, revealing parts of herself she had always kept hidden. When the Aurora entered Earth's orbit, the Council had prepared a final demonstration. Delegates from multiple civilizations gathered in the observation chamber, eager to witness the human-Varkari partnership one last time. Many still bore doubt in their expressions, though their whispers had quieted since the survival simulation. Respect had replaced ridicule in some hearts, but suspicion lingered in others. The final task was not physical. It was a challenge of diplomacy and reasoning. The Council presented a complex scenario, a planet with multiple intelligent species facing resource scarcity. Delegates were tasked with devising a strategy that would ensure cooperation, survival, and peace. Many partnerships struggled immediately, overwhelmed by the complexity and competing interests. Elias and Thrila approached the challenge calmly. Elias began by listening to Thryla's analysis. Her multiple eyes scanned data faster than any human could, identifying patterns in the species' behavior, predicting potential conflicts, and calculating solutions. She explained her insights in a clear, methodical manner. Elias, in turn, offered perspective based on human experience, empathy, negotiation, and the understanding of compromise. They worked seamlessly. Thryla's logic complemented Elias' intuition, while his empathy refined her calculations. Together, they produced a strategy that not only satisfied the needs of all species, but also anticipated future conflicts. The Council observers leaned forward, some taking notes, others whispering in amazement. Delegates who had doubted them in the past now watched silently, unable to ignore the brilliance of their combined reasoning. When the presentation concluded, the chamber was quiet for a moment before applause began to fill the room. It started with a few hands, then more, until the majority of delegates stood, acknowledging the success of the human and the Varkari. Elias and Thrila exchanged a glance, subtle but meaningful. No words were necessary. They had proven themselves not just to the galaxy but to each other. Afterward, the Council leader addressed them privately. "Captain Mercer, Thrila, your partnership has been exemplary. You have demonstrated courage, intelligence, and the ability to see beyond superficial differences. This is a rare quality in the galaxy. You have shown what true cooperation can achieve." Thrila inclined her head. "It is unusual to be recognized for being oneself," she admitted. For cycles, I have been judged only on appearance. Today, the galaxy has seen my abilities. Elias placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. And I have seen them all along. I did not hesitate because I already knew your worth. Others may take longer to understand, but I recognized it from the start. For the first time, Thrila allowed herself to feel completely understood. Her defenses, carefully maintained for cycles, relaxed. She realized that the bond they shared was not dependent on recognition or reward. It was real, built on trust, respect, and shared experience. The Aurora prepared to return to the neutral station before their final departure to Earth. The ship was alive with chatter, delegates discussing the results and sharing stories of the simulations and the challenges faced. Elias and Thrila moved quietly through the corridors, observing the reactions without needing to speak. They had achieved something extraordinary, yet their focus was not on accolades. It was on the partnership they had built, the understanding that they could rely on each other no matter the challenge. One evening, as the stars stretched into infinite lines outside the observation deck, Elias spoke. "Do you know why I never hesitated when I first met you?" Thryla's gaze met his, reflecting the nebulae and distant suns. "Because you recognized me for who I am," she replied softly. "Even before the survival simulation, you saw past my appearance. That gave me strength." Elias nodded. "I did not hesitate because I already knew strength, intelligence, and courage are not measured by appearances. You had all three. From the moment we met, I trusted you completely." Thrila allowed herself a small smile. "Then I was fortunate. Most beings would not have seen past the surface." "Perhaps," Elias said gently, "but the galaxy is changing. It has begun to see what we already know. That worth is measured not by shape, skin, or scales, but by action, courage, and heart." In the days before Earth, the pair spent much of their time together, exploring the ship, sharing stories, and quietly reflecting. Thrila revealed more of her past, challenges, lessons, and experiences that had shaped her into the being she had become. Elias shared tales of humanity's small victories, of empathy and resilience, and the value of seeing potential in every being, no matter how they looked. By the time the Aurora descended toward Earth, the galaxy had begun to witness something rare. A human and a Varkari, judged initially by appearance, now respected and admired for their skill, intelligence, and partnership. Delegates who had doubted them had begun to reconsider assumptions, realizing that strength and value were not skin-deep. When they finally landed on Earth, the planet's blue oceans and green continents stretched before them, familiar yet vast. The Council had organized a ceremony to welcome their returning delegates. Delegates from other species approached, offering gestures of respect and acknowledgement. Whispers of doubt were replaced by admiration and curiosity. Thrila walked among them with her usual grace, her posture confident and calm. Elias stayed beside her, his presence a quiet affirmation of trust and understanding. Delegates approached to ask questions, to understand how they had achieved success, and to learn from their example. Thrila responded with clarity, intelligence, and humility, showing that her abilities and her mind were far greater than appearances could ever suggest. That evening, as the ceremony concluded, Elias and Thrila stood on a terrace overlooking the earth below. The sun set in brilliant streaks of orange and purple, reflecting on oceans and forests alike. "You have changed the galaxy in a small way," Elias said quietly. "Not by force or conquest, but by showing what is possible when trust and understanding guide action." Thryla's many eyes softened, reflecting warmth she rarely allowed herself. "And you have changed me," she said. "You saw me for who I am." "That is something I will carry forever," Elias smiled faintly. "We have changed each other, and together we have shown that the galaxy's prejudices can be overcome, one step at a time, one action at a time." The night stretched around them, quiet and full of promise. Stars glittered overhead, and for the first time in cycles, Thrila felt at peace. She was no longer judged for appearances, no longer dismissed for being different. She had been seen, recognized, and respected. And she had walked beside a human who had never hesitated to trust her. In that quiet moment, the journey of two unlikely companions reached a new beginning. The galaxy had tested them, judged them, and observed them, yet they had remained steadfast. They had proven that courage, intelligence, empathy, and heart were far more powerful than prejudice or fear. Elias Mercer knew that the galaxy still had far to go. Appearances would always tempt quick judgment. But he also knew that one human and one Varkari had shown what was possible when understanding and trust guided action, and that, he believed, could inspire others across worlds. Thrila, once dismissed as the ugliest alien in the galaxy, now walked with confidence, her abilities recognized and her mind respected. She had learned that worth is never skin-deep. She had learned that trust could overcome judgment, and that partnership could achieve greatness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the planet, Ilias and Thrila looked out together. Their journey had been long, filled with trials, challenges, and doubts. But it had also been filled with discovery, understanding, and the quiet triumph of recognition. The galaxy might continue to judge, to doubt, and to fear what it did not understand. But Ilias and Thrila had already discovered a truth that no prejudice could deny. Appearances do not define worth. Courage, intelligence, empathy, and heart do. And in that knowledge, they had found something greater than survival. They had found a bond that could endure any challenge, and a lesson that could echo across the stars for generations to come. The partnership of human and Varkari had become legend, not for what the galaxy initially saw, but for what it had learned. That recognition, trust, and understanding are the true measures of greatness. And so, the story of Ilias Mercer and Thrila of the Varkari reached a quiet, yet powerful conclusion. Not with conquest or triumph, but with the enduring proof that humanity, when paired with courage and empathy, can rise above prejudice and see the true worth in every being. The stars stretched endlessly above them, but for the first time, they felt that they were not so distant. Together, they had bridged worlds, forged understanding, and proven that even the most unlikely partnership could change the course of perception in a galaxy that was learning, slowly but surely, to see beyond appearances.